9:47 a.m., September 19, 2024. Strait of Hormuz. A low rotor hump cuts across the sea. An Iranian military helicopter shot toward a massive U.S. Navy destroyer. Cameras were rolling. The mission seemed straightforward. Fly close, look dangerous, force the Americans to react, and go home with the evidence of victory. 30 minutes later, they limped home with failing engines, nearly empty fuel tanks, and a story that wouldn't match the reality. This is what actually happened. That morning, the USS Reynolds cruised through the Persian Gulf at 22 knots. This destroyer weighed over 8,000 tons and carried enough firepower to level targets beyond the horizon. Its radar systems tracked everything for miles around. The ship didn't need to flex or make threats. Its presence alone sent a clear message. Tehran had been watching American warships navigate the Persian Gulf for days like they owned the place. Iranian military leadership wanted something they could spin as a victory, something that showed Iran could still push back. They needed footage for state television. The problem? Iran's modern equipment was ancient. Most of it came from decades ago, built before many of their pilots were born. Their helicopters were older than the smartphones in their pockets. But when you're desperate to prove something, worn-out engines and missing spare parts don't seem to matter. Tehran's planners missed one crucial question. What happens when the Americans just don't care? They were about to find out. At 9:45 a.m., the Iranian helicopter struggled into the air from Bandar Abbas. Inside the cramped cockpit, the crew immediately fought their own equipment. The controls vibrated from worn bearings that should have been replaced years ago. Half the warning lights had been disconnected because actually fixing them wasn't an option. The pilot ran quick calculations that looked worse by the second. Fuel consumption at that speed, fighting headwinds, trying to keep pace with a destroyer doing 22 knots? Maybe 35 minutes of flight time. Maybe less if that oil pressure kept dropping. The plan was simple. Fly up close to the American warship, look threatening on camera, shout warnings so they could show it back home, try to force a reaction, film it all, and return with proof that Iran could still stand up to the US. Nobody briefed them on what to do when the Americans treat you like an annoying bug. 14 miles out, the Reynolds radar tagged the helicopter automatically. The combat system ran its analysis in microseconds. The ship could have taken them out in under 30 seconds, but none of that mattered because nobody on the Reynolds saw this as a threat. The officer on watch noted the contact like someone mentioning partly cloudy skies. The defensive systems tracked the aircraft automatically but stayed on standby. No reason to react to a minor annoyance. What the Iranian crew didn't realize was that, while they thought they were in control, every signal their helicopter transmitted was being recorded. They thought they were demonstrating power. Actually, they were handing over valuable intelligence. And the Americans were listening carefully, taking detailed notes. The Iranian pilot pushed lower, dropping to 450 feet in what their training manuals called an aggressive intercept profile. The aging airframe shook and groaned. Stress fractures that had probably existed since the 1970s complained louder, but orders were orders. Through scratched plexiglass, the pilot watched the USS Reynolds maintain course like nothing was happening. No speed change, no evasive moves, no defensive posturing whatsoever. The destroyer's wake stretched behind it, calm as a lake. Just another Tuesday morning in the Gulf. A sharp whump of rotor blades cut through the humid air, mixing with the hiss of sea spray slapping the cockpit windows. Inside the helicopter, the crew chief watched instruments drop into danger zones. Fuel is burning faster than planned. Oil pressure is bouncing wildly. Engine temperature is climbing steadily. This ancient machinery was giving everything it had left, which meant barely staying airborne. A low rattle buzzed through the seat frame. The helicopter made another pass, approaching from the port side. The pilot searched desperately for any sign they were being taken seriously, any indication of concern. On the destroyer's deck, sailors continued routine work. One coiled line. Another checked the equipment. A third sat on a bollard drinking coffee. Not a single person looked up at the helicopter. Inside the combat center, sailors monitored their screens with relaxed professionalism. The Iranian pilot's voice crackled over the radio again. desperation bleeding through forced authority. This is your final warning to the American vessel. Change course now, or face serious consequences. He sounded like someone threatening to write a strongly worded letter. The Americans didn't acknowledge the transmission. They were busy with actual ship operations, specifically preparing to execute a routine navigation adjustment programmed hours earlier during morning planning. Complete coincidence, perfect timing. Inside the struggling helicopter, reality became impossible to ignore. The fuel gauge read barely enough to reach base if they turned around right now. The port engine temperature had climbed deep into the red zone. Multiple warning lights flashed. The aircraft was slowly falling apart mid-flight, held together by outdated engineering and increasingly desperate hope. The crew chief grabbed the pilot's shoulder hard, pointing frantically at the fuel gauge, then the engine instruments, then the oil pressure warning. The message screamed clearly, "Leave now or this becomes a crash." At that exact moment, the destroyer turned. Smooth and deliberate, the massive warship adjusted heading to starboard, cutting a new course through Gulf waters. The Iranian pilot's pulse surged. Success! The Americans were responding, backing down and changing course because of Iranian warnings. This was the victory Tehran demanded, the proof they needed. He keyed the radio immediately, barely controlling his excitement. The American vessel is now complying with Iranian instructions. Our territorial sovereignty is acknowledged and respected. In the Reynolds bridge, the quartermaster checked the navigation display and suppressed a smile. They'd just executed a pre-planned waypoint adjustment programmed at 3:30 a.m. during the morning navigation brief. Nothing to do with the helicopter. Nothing to do with Iranian warnings. Nothing to do with anything except following their planned route. Pure coincidence with absolutely perfect comedic timing. The signals analyst monitoring electronic systems made certain every sensor recorded this moment. This would become legendary in fleet intelligence circles. Within hours, everyone knew exactly what would happen next. Iranian state television would transform this routine navigation into a heroic confrontation. Dramatic music would accompany carefully edited footage. Bold claims of forcing the American retreat. Proof of Iranian military strength. The reality that they'd merely witnessed scheduled navigation wouldn't make Iranian broadcasts. The fact that American sailors had ignored them completely wouldn't be mentioned. The truth that they'd been treated like background noise while believing they were projecting power, that would stay buried in Tehran's internal briefings. The helicopter banked hard toward the Iranian coast, both engines coughing smoke, fuel gauge reading near zero, leaving a dark trail that American sensors tracked continuously until it crossed into Iranian airspace. The pilot would land and file glowing reports. Command would issue commendations. State television would celebrate heroism. Aboard the USS Reynolds, sailors completed their scheduled course change and returned to routine operations. The helicopter was forgotten within minutes, just another line in the daily log. 6 hours later, Iranian state television broadcast its masterpiece. Triumphant music swelled over shaky footage of the helicopter approaching the destroyer. The editing was surgical. They cut every shot showing the smoke trail from dying engines, removed all footage of sailors ignoring them, eliminated any evidence that the destroyer's defensive systems never left standby. The narrative played perfectly for domestic audiences. The reality would have been embarrassing. What Tehran couldn't see was the intelligence harvest they'd just handed over. Every radar emission from that helicopter now lives permanently in American military databases. Every radio frequency is logged and analyzed in detail. Every electronic signature is captured, cataloged, and cross-referenced. Next time American forces encountered that specific helicopter type anywhere worldwide, electronic warfare systems would know precisely which frequencies to jam, which signals to disrupt, how to blind its sensors instantly and completely. The Iranians had essentially written a detailed instruction manual for their own electronic defeat while celebrating victory on television. The real damage wasn't technical, it was psychological. Iran had launched their most aggressive intimidation attempt, and America hadn't paused lunch. They'd issued stern warnings and received polite silence. They'd risked irreplaceable Cold War aircraft to demonstrate relevance, and the Americans had treated them like background static. The technological gap between Iranian capabilities and American naval power wasn't just significant, it was measured in decades of advancement, and no amount of carefully edited television footage could bridge it. In the Persian Gulf, American destroyers continued their patrols, completely unbothered and utterly dominant. The Reynolds logged the encounter. Another day in the Gulf. Sometimes the most devastating response to aggression isn't overwhelming retaliation or superior firepower. It's complete indifference backed by quiet confidence in absolute superiority. That September afternoon, Iran threw their best intimidation play at a target that never even blinked. They'd attempted to project strength and instead broadcast desperation. They'd demanded respect and received dismissive politeness. They'd claimed victory while voluntarily surrendering intelligence that would compromise their operations for years ahead. They thought they won, but the gap between what they claimed happened and what actually occurred, that was the real defeat, just not for America.